Hello and welcome to a discussion on the topic religious ideas of Habermas, Bourdieu and Foucault. You might be familiar with the three names I just said, but in case you are not, let me just say that all three of them are notable contemporary social and cultural theorists. While the German sociologist and philosopher Habermas is best known for his theories on communicative rationality and the public sphere, the French sociologist Bourdieu is best known for his theories of class distinction, power and practice, media and cultural reproduction. Foucault, another important French philosopher and social theorist, is best known for his addressing the relation between power and knowledge and how they are used as a form of social control through various societal institutions. So, what we see is the work of these three on religion was very much limited, but interestingly, their religious ideas hold great significance in theological studies, particularly in the field of sociology of religion. So much so that present day religion and religious deliberations cannot be studied without taking into account the contributions of these thinkers. Let me begin with the religious ideas of Jürgen Habermas. Now, it is important to remember that Habermas was largely influenced by Max Weber's theory of rationalization and secularization. Habermas's theory of religion mainly comprises of his understanding of the dual structure of society, and as many of you might know, by dual structure of society he means system on the one hand and the life world on the other. For Habermas, religion is fundamental to social evolution, something that he intended to imply in his work Legitimation Crisis. He wrote that due to the process of modernization, religion has been delimited only to questions of meaning and purpose. This implies that religion has lost its importance in the modern society, because in the modern society the power of the holy is replaced by the power of an achieved unanimity. But there is one exceptional case where religion may have a function. This is in the communication process of the life world. What Habermas wrote in the theory of communicative action is that religion is based on the developmental process in which God is transformed into an abstraction, and he shares those characteristics which, according to him, constitute the ideal form of communication. Habermas calls this as the linguistification of the sacred. Here, what we must note is that this discourse talks at length about the truth and rightfulness of religion and does not provide an uninhibited communicative action in any way. Perhaps this is because the mythical world cannot differentiate between culture and nature, or even between language and the wider world. Now, see, Habermas's religious ideas have been criticized by many scholars. While some say that his ideal speech community assumes a singular public sphere rather than a multiplicity of public spheres, some others have questioned his approach to religion as being a monolithic and reified phenomenon, and also his ignorance of the philosophical influences upon it. Another point is that Habermas has polarized religion and reason, and this prevents an understanding of the debates within various religious traditions like doctrine, interpretations, and scripture. Another thing that I wish to deliberate is that Habermas has often been wrongly labeled as an anti-religious thinker. He was not anti-religious, but he was a secularist who acknowledged the importance of religion in shaping the identity of the West. In fact, he had also come up with the point that religion has quite an important role to play in the social development. While he had emphasized on the transfiguration of religious statements made in the public sphere into a general language, he repeatedly keeps emphasizing that secular actors must also be willing to understand the concept of religion. But it is equally important to remember that Habermas considers religion to be separated from everyday experiences and practical reasoning and all. He fails to understand that religious identity can be one of the many identities that can be present simultaneously in an individual. In addition, Habermas' theories have also been elaborated in the works of European and American theologians, perhaps because the way he studied religion and his religious ideas reflect the changing role and nature of religion in the contemporary society. I now move on to discuss the religious ideas as propounded by the French thinker Pierre Bourdieu. To begin with, Bourdieu's immense contribution in this regard lies in the usage of words like belief and field, words that have been developed from the social scientific study of the field of religion itself. What we also find is that, especially in his work Outline of the Theory of Practice, that was published in 1977, that Bourdieu was greatly influenced by the works of many classical sociologists like Karl Marx and Max Weber. In this sense, that he wanted to identify those strategies that the dominant classes use to preserve their power and prestige. Being inspired by Weber, as I already said, Bourdieu studied Weber's theory of religious power by employing his concept of field. He then came to the conclusion that processes such as urbanization and division of labor formed a considerably autonomous religious field that in turn is characterized by the relations between the common men and religious agents like the prophets and priests. Bourdieu also said that the battle for religious power is associated with the battle for religious legitimacy. Well, religious legitimacy is actually the legitimate power exercised by certain specialists to improve the practices and worldview of common men by foisting on them a religious habitus, that is to say, a matrix of religious perceptions. So, eventually what happens is the dynamics of the religious field in turn get characterized by the conflicting relations between the specialists and also by the exchange relations between the specialists and the commoners. It would be important to mention that Weber's ideas of charisma and legitimacy in developing his theory of symbolic power, as I say, symbolic power, let me say that the term symbolic actually refers to the construction of that reality that establishes order and meaning in the social world. He further went to talk of religious legitimacy after being inspired by Weber's ideas of legitimacy. He says that religious legitimacy is nothing but an expression or manifestation of religious power relations at a given time, and this is actually related to the degree to which a religious agent like a priest has got control over material and symbolic weapons of religious violence. However, what is to be noted is that Bourdieu's sociology of religion underwent change in the latter years, when in the 1990s he began to consider religion to be a part of culture. Nevertheless, many of his ideas are widely used to obtain an understanding of the various dimensions of religion even today. For example, his concept of habitus has been used to study the relations and interactions between Muslim women belonging to varying ethnic and national contexts. Some examples are the religio-political ethnic movements as well as more general issues of struggle in the USA. Interactions and relations between Muslim women of different ethnic and national backgrounds, such as the Asian Muslim women in England, etc. Like there was a study that showed how differences in social habitus affected their relations with others. Asian Muslim women, while in the early stages of their teaching careers in England, found it extremely difficult to communicate with other secular teachers because their lifestyle was poles apart from what they had. Their deepest level of communication was limited to other Asian Muslims only, and they hardly interacted with other non-Muslim women they came across. Bourdieu has also spoken about differential tests between different social classes in his work, Distinction, that was published in 1979. Here in this book, he wrote that the religious tests and practices of high status individuals have a great impact on religious diffusion. Like the famous Hollywood actor Richard Gere or Madonna, renowned American singer and songwriter, follow Tibetan Buddhism and Kabbalah respectively. So, to sum up this part, what we can say is that Bourdieu's religious ideas are very much associated with power and domination. His studies provide an understanding of how meaning and identity can be developed from power, and also how religion itself becomes a distinction in the contemporary society. I now move on to another French scholar and the third figure under this discussion, Michel Foucault. See, Foucault has not discussed religion and the associated themes of religion at length. Initially, his focus on the repressive nature of religion and on the death of God discussion. What we see in his notable works like Madness and Civilization and The Birth of the Clinic is that how he presented religion as something that is a part of our culture and how it affects the way madness and medicine is understood in the West. He has quite a few other works to his credit as well, like in Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. He examines a complex network of relations between power and knowledge and how different forms of punishment also have a base in religion. He also discusses about Christianity with his examination of confession and ethics of self in the history of sexuality. Sexuality, according to Foucault, is historically constructed. As he says, the early ideas of sexuality were traced in the Greco-Roman world, and then they were later modified by Christianity. Speaking of Christianity, Foucault also showed how Christian pastoral practice induced the idea that every person ought to be governed and ought to let himself be governed by orienting himself to the salvation of God. Because it is to God that every man is obliged for complete obedience. In this way, religion controls the behavior of individuals and groups of individuals through its practices. At the same time, if you go through his work, What is Critique?, you will find that Foucault shows how not to be governed by religion and why not to accept is as true just because some authority deems it to be true. So, he actually provided very short yet unique ideas about religion in his work. Due to such uniqueness in his work, till date, Foucault's work is referred in studies of religion and power, religion and culture, religion and the body, and the like. So long I have spoken of the religious ideas and perspectives of Habermas, Bourdieu and Foucault. What is common in the works of all these three thinkers is power, as you might have understood by now. Let me consider the example of Muslim headscarf for a more elaborate understanding. You see, the Muslim headscarf is a much disputed religious symbol since it is often questioned in terms of power in the contemporary Western societies and even in some Muslim societies. In Habermas's theory of power, communicative power is one of the most important concepts. Communicative power arises between those actors who, in solidarity, try and search for the correct norms for social interaction and act accordingly. If the same thing is applied to the case of the Muslim headscarf, you will notice that it prevails only in the private sphere of the lives of those Muslim women. So, what happens in the public sphere then? In the public sphere, identity politics becomes a key aspect. Social and religious movements focus more and more on the minority groups, precisely on the formation of their personal identity and soliciting respect for their differences. Habermas asserts that this politics of recognition is the main and perhaps the ultimate concern of the public culture. But later in his works, Habermas speaks of religion only by drawing its references to rationality. By this, the headscarf or hijab, as you might say, can be used by Muslim women in the public sphere as a religious symbol only if they stand for the use of this symbol in line with universal norms for a rational controversy. Thus, hijab, whose practice was restricted solely in the private sphere, can be brought out into the public sphere as well. On the other hand, for Pierre Bourdieu, the hijab denotes a symbol of misrecognition because the real and the worldly conditions get camouflaged. This means that male religious authorities exercise their power and control over the women, despite the fact that female scholars are also present. Coming to the ideas of Foucault in this context, an understanding of body politics is essential. What Foucault says is that the human body experiences and undergoes many changes since religious groups are very much engaged in body politics and arguments about what should be done with the body and what not. In this sense, the hijab epitomizes a part of body politics that holds a lot of significance with regard to key political issues in multicultural societies. In conclusion, all I can say is that the ideas and opinions of Habermas, Bourdieu and Foucault put forth a somewhat negative position of religion. Particularly, Bourdieu and Foucault have considered the hijab to be a rather despotic thing. Habermas's views too cannot be overlooked because he had highlighted on the rights of Muslim women and other minority groups by linking the concept of power to laws, to norms and to principles as well. All three of them reveal a negative position of religion in society through their study of religion and power. Thus, what remains interesting is that all of these three thinkers on whom this module was structured have in their own ways helped us understand the different changes of the religiously multitudinous modern societies. With this, we come to an end of the discussion on the topic religious ideas of Habermas, Bourdieu and Foucault. Thank you for attending the lecture. We shall meet again in some other discussion on some other topic.